Okay, now we have special meeting of the Urbana City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Barnes.
Here.
Bowersox.
Here.
Chenoweth.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Smythe. Stevenson. Mayor Pressing.
Here. Is there anyone who would like to address the City Council? Any member of the public? Okay, the first item then is ordinance number 2007-01-001, an ordinance approving a special use permit to allow the establishment of a telecommunications tower with equipment enclosure in the R4 medium-density multiple-family residential zoning district. And we have Robert Myers to explain this to us.
Could I interrupt with a quick...
Mr. Bowersox.
Sorry to interrupt the normal flow of the agenda, but usually at the start of the agenda we have approval of the minutes, and we did get the December 4 minutes in the packet. I didn't know... No, okay.
They're not on the agenda.
They won't be on the agenda for approval
Yeah.
tonight, but some
Okay.
other week. Thanks. Sorry. Go right ahead, Robert.
Thanks. Thanks. Thanks for your patience. We have a heavy agenda tonight, so I'm going to move pretty quickly, but there was a couple of items where it's kind of crucial that we have an overhead projection for the couple items tonight. This is a case, it's a request by Metcad 911 for a special use permit to install a 285-foot tall telecommunications tower with equipment enclosure at 1905 East Main Street. And it would be located behind Metcad's existing 911 Emergency Communications Center. Property is owned by Champaign County. It's zoned R4, medium density, multiple family residential zoning district. And I believe that zoning reflects the use of the county nursing home. I believe that's the reason that the property is zoned residential, but it's been in county use for all these years. And Metcad is the central dispatch center for emergency responders in Champaign County. 2005, they handled over 350,000 calls. The current system is 25 years old. They're upgrading it to a new state-of-the-art system, and currently they've replaced other towers. This is what would be called the East Tower, but it's also at the Metcad's dispatch center. The zoning ordinance requires special use permit approval for towers in this zoning district. Just to be clear, the City of Urbana contracts with Metcad for police, fire, and public works dispatch, and I believe the only emergency responders in the county that I'm aware of that don't use Metcad is the City of Rantoul. The essential aspect of Metcad's emergency response is reliable two-way radio communication, and their system both assigns calls from the public and allows responders to coordinate their operations. The tower would be sited behind Metcad's existing building and about 300 feet south. And about 300 feet south of Main Street, located about here. You have a copy of this in your packet. But again, it would be located behind their building, so it would not be readily visible. The base would not be from Main Street itself. In addition to the tower, which is going to be of lattice-type construction, there's a modular equipment building, 12 by 16, and a backup electrical generator, which is typical for such towers. The site plan shows 4 mature trees at the base, which would remain, and the largest being about 3 feet in diameter. So you do have some really mature trees that would remain around the site. They will have to take out 3 trees on the immediate tower location, but the other trees would remain. And it seems they've done a good job of trying to preserve those other trees. General tower requirements. Typically, towers in residential zoning districts are limited to no more than 50 feet in height, and they should be set back from any residential lot at least equal to twice the tower height, but the zoning ordinance does allow waivers to be granted by the council, and for the reasons stated on page, for the reasons stated in your staff report, we believe that there is good cause for granting waivers for those 2 provisions. In terms of the requirements for special use permit, our normal requirements, again, these are in your staff report, but for instance, the first requirement, the proposed use is conducive to public convenience at that location. In staff's analysis, the proposed use is critical for the operation of METCAD, which dispatches and provides communication for emergency responders throughout Champaign County. The other special use permit requirements that follow, that are in your memo, you'll see each one of those requirements followed by city staff's analysis. City staff finds that the proposed or the application does meet the special use permit requirements. It is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. We're also recommending granting of waivers in specified circumstances that are provided in your staff report. And additionally, the Plan Commission at their December 21st meeting did recommend unanimously in favor of this application. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'd also like to note that the applicant is here in the audience tonight, a representative of METCAD, and if you have any questions for them, they can answer, especially with the technical questions. They're well suited for that.
Mr. Smythe.
I have one basic question. Maybe the METCAD representative can answer it. The existing tower right now is located up against the building. Mm-hmm. Why does this tower need to be out by itself, separated from the rest of the building? And
okay, the separation.
Yeah, there's their existing tower is literally right up against the back of their building. From, if I understand the plans here correctly.
Okay.
But this new tower is out on its own pad, and it's developed a lot fancier. I know it's a little taller. Maybe that's the reason, but technically, I'd like to know the technical reasons for that, I guess.
I'm Greg Abbott with METCAD 911. I made a presentation to you several months ago on this same project. The reason that this tower is located out where it is because the existing 235-foot tower that's adjacent to the building that you mentioned has guy wires attached to it, and there's clearance issues in relationship to where the tower is and where those guy wires come off the existing tower that we had to take into account. Right. And the ultimate plan will be to remove the 235-foot tower that's there today. It's probably going to be, 5 to 7 years before that's done.
Does anyone else have a question? Ms. Barnes?
I just would like to move that we approve ordinance number 2007-01-001.
Okay, motion by Ms. Barnes, second by Mr. Bowersox. Any further discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Barnes,
Yes?
Bowersox,
Yes.
Chenoweth. Yes. Lewis.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Smythe.
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance is approved.
Thank you very much.
Our next ordinance is 2007-01-002, the second ordinance of the year. An ordinance approving a major variance to allow 100% encroachment into the 5-foot side yard setback for construction of multi-car garages in the R5 medium density multiple family zoning district on the south side of Hollywood Drive. And Robert Myers, our planner, will explain this one to us.
The titles are always a mouthful. All right, this is a request for a major variance. The applicant is Villas at Fairlawn LLC, and the request is allow construction for multi-car garages at Fairlawn Village condominium development. And the garages are intended to encroach within the required 5-foot setback on the south border of the property. And just to give you a quick indication of where we're talking about, here's Fairlawn Drive on the north, and then to the south, past the buildings, you'll find Hollywood Drive, which is an alley, actually. Although it's named, that's unusual. But on the south side of that alley, squeezed between the alley and the property line, there's a narrow strip of land, and it varies from 25 feet wide to 35 feet wide, and it's over 300 feet long. It's a highly unusual situation, honestly, but that's the way it exists at this location. There are currently garages that are already on this narrow strip that are existing, and also a shed as well. And so the applicants they're in the process of rebuilding the site, converting from apartments to condominiums, and they want to have garages placed off of the alley rather than have garages right off the street, for instance, right off of Fairlawn. They'd like to have them tucked behind the building and on this narrow strip of land where the other garages are, again between the alley and the property line. Garages have standard sizes. Typically, this one would be about 22 feet deep. To give you a better sense of what we're talking about here, what they're proposing specifically, and this site plan is helpful. Specifically, they're proposing that the garages be about 3 feet from the rear property line, from the wall of the backside of the garage to the back property line. And that's specifically what's being proposed. The eaves would extend beyond that just a little bit, but from the wall itself, they're showing in their site plan that it'll be about 3 feet from the property line. In terms of the variance criteria, again, you have this in your staff report, but I would quickly like to go over this. Variance, first criteria, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege. One, this is an unusually shaped area, parcel remnant, which varies in depth from 25 feet to 35 feet. It's an unusual situation. Two, the variance request is not the result of the petitioner. It wasn't created by the petitioner, and it certainly wasn't the way the property has existed for many years. Three, the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Well, there's existing garages at the east end that's already there, and there's a shed at the west end. There's apartments right behind this. These buildings would be about 20 feet away from the apartments behind it. Four, the variance will not cause a nuisance to adjacent property. We believe it will not. It does have some setback for purposes of maintenance and water runoff, etc. Five, the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from the requirements of zoning ordinance, and that we do believe that is also the case because it's the minimum necessary for this property to be used for garages, because garages, again, are kind of standard depths because of standard car sizes. And six, the variance is a result of practical difficulties or a particular hardship, and we, city staff believes that it is, because the required 5-foot setback mean that you couldn't put a standard depth of a garage in this location, where there's already garages on that same parcel remnant. So with that, both the city staff and the Zoning Board of Appeals are recommending approval for this variance.
Mayor? Mayor?
Ms. Barnes?
Given that the zoning board of appeals voted for it unanimously, and I personally like this project, it's moving some of our rental properties to ownership in a condominium style, and I think this will enhance the neighborhood. I recommend that we approve this.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Barnes, second by Ms. Chenoweth. Did you want to say something, Mr. Roberts?
I wanted to ask Robert something.
Okay.
Actually, two things.
Sure.
I don't have, it seems to me like a useful,
Turn my mic on. I think it seems like a useful use of our remnant land form. I just had a couple questions. Is Hollywood Drive currently paved? And is there any question, or has there been a discussion about maintenance of that drive? Is it a city street, or is it a private alley?
Okay. Hollywood is going to be upgraded as part of this project. Hollywood Drive is a public street. What's that?
Public alley.
A public alley.
Excuse me. And the Fairlawn Drive to the north is a private alley. On the north side. North of Fairlawn, there's an alley on the north side that kind of mirrors the Hollywood alley, but that's a private alley. But the alley will be upgraded as part of the project.
So is that deemed adequate for the, obviously, much heavier use by city planning? I mean, are they satisfied? Is it a paved alley, or will it become a paved alley?
It will be a paved alley, yes, and it will be upgraded. It's, actually, we've gone over this case quite a bit in our design review team. That includes the fire department, public works, et cetera, and we've looked at it pretty closely, so we feel it will be adequate.
And my other question is, are these going to be constructed as normal garages enclosed with a garage door, or is it a carport with several bays?
There will be garages. I don't know about garage doors, but the applicant, I believe an applicant's representative is here this evening. Yes.
So they'll be enclosed individual garages, but they'll be cheek to jowl in a long row. Okay. And my last question is that, I don't know if this diagram is north-south oriented, but
Yes.
to the back of the garages, you have like a 3-foot space.
Yes.
And then is there a wall separating it from the other property to the south? You said that there was an apartment or something
Will
to the
there
south.
be a new wall put in place? or
Well, is there a
that's-
wall now?
There is an old fence with trees growing up through it. And there's some scrub trees there that will be removed.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, you said it wouldn't impinge upon or deteriorate or anything the property to the south, and I'm just wondering if there had been a consideration for masking the set of garages, or does the staff feel that just having the back cement wall of the garages is adequate to appropriately disguise or mask?
Appropriately screened. We're anticipating that the back wall will be in and of itself a good screen.
So you're not requiring landscaping or a wood fence or any such in association with this construction?
No, that hasn't been part of the proposed requirements.
I guess, I kind of wonder about that, but maybe I'd open that up to any comment from other council members.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily a killing event, but I mean, it's always good to screen the back end of your lot from your neighbor, especially if it's just utilitarian. And I mean, that's just a comment on my part.
Right. Well, normally they could be 5 feet. If they built 5 feet from the property line, they could do it by right. And essentially, they're looking to go 3 feet from the property line.
Special waiver.
Yes, that's right. Special use, special variance.
Does anybody else have a concern about that? I might ask council. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Barnes.
One more.
Second by Mr. Chenoweth. We have like a comment from Mr. Smythe.
Yeah, I guess the only, I have no problem with the variance. What I don't understand is why we're in the business of maintaining an alleyway here that looks like, for all practical purposes, it's like the north side and should just belong to the apartment complex. Now, I understand, Insight has its building there at one end, and there's a little shopping center there, but if they could go in and out on their parking lot, in their parking area, is there any reason why we have to continue to have this as part of city property? Why don't we just make it, why don't we vacate it to Fair Lawn from, the Insight building to the east? Why should we be responsible for what is essentially a private driveway through an apartment complex? It goes to Anderson on the other end.
That's
Okay, Bill Gray, our Public Works Director, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, we looked at the idea of vacation. There were adjacent property owners. It's not all totally surrounded by this one property owner, so that in and of itself presented a little bit of a problem. So through the vacation process, part of the land would be going to a non-property owner of this property. The other thing is it does function somewhat as a street, as a throughway, albeit serving largely one property owner. But there are folks that go to Domino's Pizza and the other uses in that property off, and may take it. It's a one-way alley, so it's take it to Michigan. I know I've personally done it myself. But so there is public use besides just the people that live there. So hence it's a alley/street.
Yeah, my father-in-law lives in exactly the same kind of situation. I mean, there are all these one-way alleys behind their houses, and they're very convenient for people back there. And of course, it puts your parking out of sight and off the front road. So in that sense, it's nice to have. But as long as there's a public use for it, I have no problem with it. I think it makes perfectly good sense to use it in a more efficient way here. So I'll shut up.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion. Thank you very much. We have a motion by Ms. Barnes, seconded by Ms. Chenoweth. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Barnes,
Yes?
Bowersox,
Yes.
Chenoweth. Yes. Lewis.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Smythe.
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you very much. Next, resolution number 2007-01-001R, a resolution of protest against a proposed map amendment to the Champaign County map, a 19-acre tract of land on the north side of Perkins Road, southwest of Interstate 74. And Robert Myers is handing out information about this one.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, we've done that a couple times. It's backward.
I'm sorry, I should have remembered to hand this out at the beginning of the meeting. But what I've just handed out is a slightly revised resolution of protest. Basically, the city of Urbana is changed to the Urbana Corporate Authorities. And we'll note that change for future reference.
Robert, while you're digging through there, it's my understanding that this is a situation where the county is cleaning up in response to a court order and all that. Is that
Right.
correct? Yeah.
That's
And so
correct.
this is really pretty much boilerplate and,
Yes. What's happening is the Ivanhoe Estates mobile home park off of Perkins, they want to be able to sell mobile homes within the mobile home park, which is allowed in the county, but only for use for within that mobile home park. In order to do that, they have to get a permit from the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois says we want to issue the permit unless it's in compliance with the local zoning. Well, this is not fully compliant with local zoning for two reasons. One, it's never been issued a special use permit for the entire property. And two, the western portion of the property is zoned for single-family residential. And it's existed that way since 1973, when zoning was first enacted in the county. And so essentially what's happening is this is a cleanup effort to rezone the western portion of this existing mobile home park to recognize the existing use. The existing single-family zoning in a court case in the 1980s, it was actually struck down, and the court said that it was an unconstitutional taking, and the property owner could go ahead and use it for a mobile home park, even though there was single-family zoning, and they could disregard the existing zoning. So that's essentially what's happened. They went ahead and developed the remainder of their mobile home park with mobile homes. And so we're coming back in this, or excuse me, not the city, but the county's coming back in this cleanup effort on the zoning. Just to let you know real quick, the zoning is something, it's within 1.5 miles of the city boundaries. The zoning is something, the zoning change is something that we would have protest rights over, but the special use permit is not something under state law that we would have protest rights under. But I did speak with John Hall of the county today, and he said if anyone has any comments tonight, that would be helpful for them in terms of the special use permit, which they're going to be reviewing this spring. They'll let them know. And I bring that up because a couple of people had concerns they expressed, like Brandon, I believe you had expressed a concern about fire hydrants, and someone else had expressed a concern about sidewalks. And it's not something we would review under the zoning, but under a special use permit, John Hall of the county zoning administrator, said they would welcome any sort of comments like that. But on the issue of fire, we did, again, it's not part of the zoning, but I know that, Brandon, you had some specific concerns about it. We did do a review. There are 4 fire hydrants, and these are 500 feet concentric rings around those fire hydrants. So there is a portion of the mobile home park that is not within that 500 feet. There may be another fire hydrant out there we're not aware of, but that's for your knowledge, and it's also something that the Planning Commission mentioned, and so others of you may have questions about that as well. But I wanted to let you know that we did look into that issue. Also, our fire department and our planning staff has called the rural fire district and tried to get information up from them about this very issue, and we have not received a response at this time. But just to let you know, we did follow through with that. Excuse me, I kind of lost my place now. In terms of city staff of the Plan Commission looked at this application in terms of the 2005 comprehensive plan. It's designated in our comprehensive plan for multifamily residential, and we've designated all of the mobile home parks except for one in the 1.5 mile jurisdiction within the extraterritorial jurisdiction as multifamily. So it does conform to our definition of multifamily in our comprehensive plan. You also see analysis in your staff report specifically on the different goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan. We also applied our LaSalle National Bank criteria for rezoning, and with that we did find that it does meet our criteria for rezoning. You'll find details in your staff report. And with that, both the city staff and the Plan Commission at their December 22nd meeting recommended that the City Council defeat a resolution of protest for the proposed rezoning in the county.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Lewis, to defeat a resolution of protest in this instance. Is there any discussion, any further discussion? Ms. Chenoweth?
Just on the topic of the special use permit and the county wanting some input on that, is it the case that there is a potential for there to be a lack of sidewalks on both sides of the streets in the extension of the development? What's the current plan for that extension?
Well, we could pass those comments along if people feel like that there needs to be a completion of the sidewalk network. We went out and took a look to see where the sidewalks were because that issue was raised. There is a sidewalk all the way from Cunningham up to the mobile home park, but not along the Perkins Road in front of the mobile home park. Okay. So if people want to pass along any comments about that to the county, it sounds like they would be open to that.
Yeah, basically the two that you mentioned, and I think, this council, of course, is supportive of our own subdivision code, which requires a certain number of fire hydrants for fire safety and requires sidewalk build-out. And so I think we would feel, I certainly feel very strongly about those items. I also know that I'm familiar with this particular trailer park. I used to drive school bus to that trailer park, and the number of children in the trailer park is, there's a significant number of kids on the street. There's a significant number of folks who are out, who are pedestrians and who are younger pedestrians. So I think that we need to look at safety for kids in this area and make sure that there's adequate sidewalks. So I would want to pass that on to the county.
Okay.
Could we do that in a formal way? We can, let's see, now, so our motion is to defeat this. So voting yes is the right vote then to
Yes.
defeat this, right? Because the way we've worded this thing, okay. But could we either amend this directing, or, no, we shouldn't amend it. Okay, so how should we, Jim,
Could be a second
so can we
motion.
should do another motion to direct staff? Okay, so let's do this, and then I'd like to introduce a motion.
Mr. Roberts?
If we're voting to, if we're making a motion to defeat a resolution of protest, it doesn't say that specifically in our resolution, so therefore, it doesn't have to, is that correct?
Correct.
I think we can just say that the motion is to defeat the resolution of protest.
It's to defeat the resolution before us, correct?
Right. The resolution is proposed as if you want to pass this resolution of protest. So it's all set up that if you pass this resolution of protest, it's a valid protest, and we would follow through with that like we normally do. So if you choose to defeat the resolution of protest, you would
We would vote no, wouldn't we?
you would not be passing the resolution.
Okay, so the motion was to defeat it. Okay, that's the clarity. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments on this confusing resolution here? Okay, the motion is to defeat the resolution before us. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Barnes,
Yes.
Bowersox,
Yes.
Chenoweth,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Smythe,
Yes.
Mayor Pressing.
Yes. All right, the motion carries to defeat the resolution.
Okay.
Okay, and then I would like
Okay.
to move to direct staff to draft a short note to the county board expressing the support of the city council and mayor for completion of sidewalks and additional fire hydrant as per our own code. Is that our own development codes?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Chenoweth. Any discussion?
If I could just
Okay,
add
Mr.
something real
Myers.
quick.
Go ahead.
Right, that portion of Perkins, right in front of that mobile home park, the city boundaries come up and include the right-of-way right in front of this mobile home park. So one way to deal with that might be just to ask the county to look into the possibility of completing sidewalk along that portion. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we may or may not be we're not obligating ourselves necessarily for the city to complete that portion, but I just want to make sure that that should be taken into account, that the city boundaries actually come up and include the right-of-way in front of the mobile home park. So typically, sidewalks are included within right-of-way. Here comes Bill Gray for help.
Okay. Bill Gray.
Yeah, typically, they
Well, being at this portion of the road and not all the way from Cunningham, it's in and out of the city, so there's portions in and part in the county. But
Right.
the part that's in the city, technically, when that road, and if and whenever gets improved, it would be a city responsibility to put sidewalks. As long as they're not subdividing the property, which they're not required to put sidewalks on Perkins Road. So, and there is not a continuous sidewalk along there to begin with, but
Right.
this is, from our capital improvement planning standpoint, it would be a very low priority for us to put a sidewalk there. We have just higher priorities. But there is a park there too, which is highly used. But I'm just saying, it would be a long time before we'd have money to put a sidewalk in. So if I could interject, I'd say really the responsibility would probably be more ours than the county's, than the county telling this property owner to do it. Because they're not subdividing.
I think actually what Danielle and I were referring to was sidewalks inside the trailer park.
Inside the trailer park?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that, so that way we'll have good direction.
Okay, any further discussion on this? A motion by Mr. Gray.
Well, the streets are private streets, so they're not even public streets, to my knowledge. So again, that would be a little beyond even our own subdivision code. I don't know. I'll stop. But
Ms. Chenoweth.
Would we allow, this is a question for Bill, actually. Would we allow folks to build private streets without sidewalks? And we typically don't allow that
No,
kind of private street creation anyway.
correct. But it's given. It's existing. But if there was private streets in farmland, someone's coming with a development, they want private streets, they would build the streets to the width, the quality, all the codes would be as if they were public streets with sidewalks.
That's what I thought.
Right.
And so we're basically asking for a similar kind of ethos for the county, that we would do the same thing. I mean, I don't know the last time you all were in this particular trailer park or other trailer parks with very narrow streets, but basically you have kids playing in the streets. There's absolutely no right-of-way on either side other than street traffic, and you have trailers that usually come right up to the street. So what we're talking about is any time a car is coming around the corner, it's very possible that they could injure a child. So that's kind of what's at stake, big picture, and I think it's important for us to send a clear message that if we, with private streets inside the city, require that there be sidewalks for pedestrian safety, we should also be asking the county to raise that bar, because it is the case that at some point what is the county is going to be the city, and will inherit a situation that's extremely unsafe for pedestrians.
Dennis Roberts.
And I think that the other part of this recommendation is the fire hydrant thing. And if we've seen that the circle of coverage, whatever it was, a 50 or 500 foot radius, actually left out a corner of the trailer park, that's a concern. And whether, the city may not be sending its trucks. Well, you never know. The city may end up sending trucks up there on a call if it was a serious call, and the rural fire department couldn't handle it. So any housing development that's not appropriately covered by, water resources to put out flames is a concern for the city.
Okay.
Okay, let's have a vote on this motion by Mr. Smythe, second by Ms. Chenoweth. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Motion carries. Next, ordinance number 2007 dash, I suppose that would be 01003. An ordinance to repeal section 13-3, planned unit developments of the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois, and to adopt a reinstatement of section 13-3, planned unit development of the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois.
Before we jump in, if I could make a statement.
Mr. Smythe.
Yeah, I would suggest this is a fairly complicated ordinance, And I would suggest we get staff report, lay out our questions, get any comment from the public on this, and ask, and send it to committee 2 weeks from now, so the staff can come back with answers for our questions and any changes in language, just so that people know where we're going on this. But my plan is to have this go to committee in 2 weeks.
Matt Wimpy, would you like to discuss this issue?
Sure. All right, so there's a sizable amount of information, as Mr. Smythe just indicated, for the PUD changes. And I'm going to kind of jump around, so paper-wise it may be a little bit more confusing, but I think logically it's going to be a little bit easier to swallow that way. As we said, this is a text amendment which would basically repeal our existing PUD ordinance, which has been on the books since roughly the late 1960s and amended several times. And it would adopt new PUD ordinances, and this would include changes such as creating a PUD permit, which would actually be the authorizing permit for a PUD, revising the goals for PUD so they more closely match our desired development in the comprehensive plan, creating applicability criteria, which is something that would be new, revising the development approvals process. I bored the Boy Scouts. Expanding the permitted.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Expanding permitted uses in PUDs, so it allows more mixed-use development, and creating recommended design features, which is also something new, and then making some minor administrative changes throughout the rest of the ordinance to recognize some of these changes. In general, PUDs are a zoning tool that have been used for many, many decades, and typically they're larger developments. They're integrated under a common site plan, which they have to adhere to, and they're approved much as special use is approved through the Plan Commission and then through City Council. And a good way to view PUDs is where typical zoning and subdivision regulations, they focus on individual parcels rather than an entire site, and they offer predictability, which is their benefit. But PUDs, this approach is a development in terms of the entire site. It really is meant to encourage going beyond the minimum standards of your ordinances, encouraging innovation. And the classic example of such is a conservation subdivision, which we have some examples of in the packet. And just briefly, I'd like to jump forward to one of the attachments, Exhibit C, which is our listing, or just kind of an overview of the general difficulties that staff has encountered with our current PUD ordinance. And this is just a one-page document and kind of outlines the larger picture issues. So you can look at it. We have types of PUDs. Shopping centers right now are considered PUDs. You can see the definition of 3 or more businesses managed as a unit. And I think really you're starting to find shopping centers shouldn't require that level of review, and strip centers and other commercial centers, what's normally allowed by right, just by having 3 or more businesses under a common management makes it a PUD. And there's no mixed use. We do have, I should say, 4 types of PUDs right now, but none of them allow for mixtures of uses. Although you can have up to 10% of a residential PUD is commercial, although this hasn't really proven to be feasible for developers in town. And I think the latest example of a failure of that provision was the Capstone Quarters condominiums. They were unable to make it work. The review and approval process has really proven to be excessive, and actually in recent years we've just stopped requiring a preliminary development plan. And the current ordinance has a preliminary development plan and a final development plan, which they go through the same approval process. So they go to Plan Commission, and then they go to City Council, and fairly close in their requirements. So you're basically doing the same plan twice. You can see some of select submission requirements, so having to provide elevations for all buildings and improvements, which is a significant cost, location of all utilities, location of illuminated areas, covenants and deed restrictions. It's information that's very specific, but the use of it for the review process is somewhat onerous. as I mentioned, there is the duplicative approval process, having to go through the same thing basically twice. And our development standards are incredibly prescriptive. They're very specific, and so therefore they can create developments that are more or they meet the standards, but maybe they may not make the most sense. And so we have minimum PUD size. These are artificially high. They really discourage smaller lot development, and I think that translates into infill development. And as we said, we have very prescriptive guidelines. And I pulled out one of my favorite examples here for residential parking, where it requires that you have to have 2 spaces per dwelling unit, which is more than we typically require, and that has to be located within 300 feet of the ground floor entrance. That's a great example of something that's incredibly prescriptive, and the use that it serves is questionable. So, and I just want to summarize the Plan Commission discussion. They had reviewed the proposed text amendment at 3 meetings, starting on the 30th of November and then going forward to their 21st of December meeting. A lot of the information that is included in your packet was included through the Plan Commission's discussions and kind of response to questions from some of the Plan Commissioners, particularly that it was difficult to visualize what the outcome of a PUD ordinance would be. And obviously, I think that was a really good question that was raised, and so we provided information to address that. But at the December 21st meeting, the Plan Commissioners continued their discussion. They voted 6 ayes and 1 nay to forward this to City Council for a recommendation of approval. And there had been a motion to require a preliminary and a final development plan, as we currently have, although that didn't receive a second, so the motion was defeated. And the changes to the ordinance, the way we had so many changes. We started out doing our typical strike through and underline, but it just got to the point where staff couldn't even read the ordinance. So we started over. We did take elements from the current ordinance where they work, and we put them in there. So we started with a clean copy. The strike through and underlines that you see, those are changes that were recommended by the Plan Commission, and there's only a few minor changes that were recommended. So I'm going to kind of quickly go over what changes we're proposing. So for definitions, we've added definitions that are going to be consistent with best planning practices and American Planning Association recommendations, similar to what we did with the omnibus amendment. We also add a purpose statement, which, especially when you have a more flexible type of development approval, which PUD is definitely under, it's good to have a purpose statement. This really says, and obviously what the purpose is. So we look at so going beyond the minimum zoning and development standards, referencing the comprehensive plan or other development plans and policies, and really stating that in exchange for this flexibility, we're getting public amenities that we may not usually get. So bike trails, public art, unique architecture, things of that variety. And we've revised the goals. Some of these goals are the same as from the current ordinance. We've really bolstered them to be more specific and to reference our subdivision and development design, the comprehensive plan, and really kind of being more specific in what we'd like to see PUDs accomplish. And these are tied into the comprehensive plan, best planning practices, and the state or the policies and the plans of the city in general. So that's what they're based in. We've added applicability criteria, which is something new to the proposed ordinance. And in a lot of cities where you have an older or weaker zoning ordinance, you can run into the problem where if you have a good PUD ordinance, your PUD starts to overtake your zoning ordinance. So, there's an example of Rockford, Illinois, up north. They do most of their development by PUD. And really, that's not where we want to get, because we have a good zoning ordinance in general, and it's suitable for most types of development. So we've added applicability criteria. Is really tied into the goals, and again, it's the type of development that we want to see. So you see mixed use, conservation, infill, unique development. I think a good example of that, which is included here, would be something like a lifestyle center. Wouldn't necessarily fall into the first 3, but it's definitely a development style that we would want to encourage. And this is at the determination of the zoning administrator, and it also indicates a 1/2 acre minimum size. So it's a little bit more based on the goals for encouraging infill. And for minimum development guidelines, this is basically stating that we have flexible zoning standards, we have flexible subdivision standards, and then it's allowing multiple structures and uses per lot. So basically saying that you can vary your typical your typical zoning standards, so stuff like floor area ratios, setbacks, off-street parking and loading. You can vary subdivision standards, but it's worth pointing out that a PUD is a zoning process, and obviously a subdivision will be a separate process. So it says here that you can do waivers concurrently or subsequently after the PUD, but any waivers in subdivision standards would have to be approved as part of a plat. So, and this is a good time to point out that really, there is flexibility being built into the PUD process to propose, and it's intentional, but the PUD permit would basically mirror a special use permit. So it would go to Planning Commission after the staff reviews it and the developer proposes the amendment or the development, and it would go to Planning Commission. They would be able to make recommendations, and it would come to City Council, and there'd be final approval power. So if there was something that wanted to be changed, I think within the scope of the ordinance, City Council would have that power to make changes. So there is flexibility, but I think there's also more control, in a sense, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Oh, are you finished or not?
I'm sorry. I'll keep it brief. I just want to go over the process quickly. We've changed it so now there's just a single development plan submittal process. So basically it goes straight through, and I just kind of detail it'll go to Planning Commission, City Council. We've added review criteria, and these are similar to these are new, and these are similar to our special use permit. So those first three are basically from special use permits, and then we've also added that the development would be consistent with the PUD goals, and then it would be consistent with relevant recommended design features. And we've shortened, but we've changed the administrative review. So once a plan's approved, the zoning administrator is allowed to make changes, but it's a little bit more open now on changes that can be made. Right now it's very prescriptive, and an example of such is Clark Lindsay Village wanted to expand their facility, and I believe it came down to about a 1 square foot change. It was very minor, and they had to come back and get approval because it varied from the approved development plan, and the zoning administrator couldn't administratively change that. And with permitted uses, instead of going with an inclusive list, we've gone with an exclusive list, so you can see the variety of uses that would not be allowed within a PUD based on the type, and this is tied to the table of uses. And this is really an approach that's becoming more popular in zoning nowadays. And I think if you look at where you have the control over design, you can have uses where if you design them right, they can be compatible with certain uses, which the traditional assumption may have been that they're not. So, and the recommended design features, these are taken from the MOR guidelines in part, especially the architecture suggestions, the comprehensive plan, and well, these are not all required. They shouldn't be viewed as a required list if you have to do every single one of these, but they're really recommendations from staff, and the way to look at it is if you would like to get approval, look at this list. And we're going to include this list actually on the PUD permit application. So developers are going to know up front what they're looking for. So as I said, staff and Planning Commission both recommended approval.
Mr. Smythe.
I have 8 general comments to make on here, and eight sort of questions and comments, and I'll send these to staff. But page 7 of the introduction that you just worked off of, Matt, It strikes me that we need to define the word significant in the administrative review process. I know that in other places, in other ordinances, we set some limits, like, up to certain percent change can be made. And so, it's one thing, clearly a 1 square foot change should never have gone anywhere other than, the zoning administrator. But something that was, a 50% change clearly is, a change. Is it 10%? Is it 5%? What's an appropriate definition of significant?
Well, I think some of the changes under the current ordinance take that tact, and whether or not it works is questionable. I think if you're going to start working with numbers, you just have to be sure of your numbers, I suppose. But
Okay. Well, I just thought that's page 203 of the actual PUD talks about significance, so something in there. In the permitted uses section 13.3.I here, under 1, in a residential or mixed-use planned unit development, say you have essentially a residential PUD, they want to do some communal gardening. It might be, right in the middle of town somewhere, but it's a PUD. They want to do a communal garden, and they might be, they might actually have, turn around and sell that produce at the farmer's market, for example. The way I read this is that it wouldn't be permitted.
generally, we don't consider gardens an agricultural use. They're just gardens.
They're just gardens. So there is a difference between, so what is an agricultural use then, generally?
A farm.
A farm. It's a real farm.
I think
Okay.
the distinction can be made, if not by wording, by the zoning
Okay.
administrator.
Okay, now, so last year we went up to Chicago. We visited a couple of green sites. We visited I forget what it was, northwest of town. We visited, what was the name of that? Prairie Crossing. We visited Prairie Crossing. Was that a farm or a garden that they had? They were,
I'm not familiar with Prairie Crossing.
okay, so.
It was a yard. It was a yard.
It was a yard, okay. Well, they were, selling honey that was there. They had produce that they were selling, yeah, well,
An entrepreneur to me.
yeah, well, was it, but that's my example. That's what I'm thinking,
I think agricultural general should be interpreted as commercial farming, commercial large acre farming.
Okay, well,
Libby Tyler, our Community Development Director.
And
I was
zoning
thinking of
administrator.
Prairie Crossing as well when we did the list of uses, and there's agriculture cropping that is permitted.
okay.
Agriculture general is not, so there is a distinction, but definitely thought about the different uses. They had a little store, they had a charter school, they had some agriculture. There is another example north of town where they have like a yoga studio and some greenhouses, and you can think of a lot of mixes of uses that would now be allowed in the PUD. So the only ones we excluded were things we hope are just obviously non-compatible, like a landfill, or, even the sewage treatment. I mean, you can have a package plant that would work in some of these locations. So we tried to be really creative and think about these mixes of uses potentially being suitable for a PUD, again, that goes through the special use permit process and the hearings. I just thought I'd mention that. We did think about Prairie Crossing when we put this together.
Okay. Lynn, did you want to jump in with my questions, or?
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Okay.
I guess philosophically, I think one reason we are making these changes, which I think are very good, is to make this a little more of a friendly atmosphere for developers in terms of bringing things and ideas to Urbana. And I don't really want to head down the path necessarily of greater specificity in defining some of these terms, because I think this is designed so that the zoning administrator, which is actually a top-level employee of the city, should be allowed using a lot of these other tools that we've already developed to make those decisions, rather than us getting into the nitty-gritty and defining it further.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is we need to understand what the word significant means.
And I would say that's difficult to measure in all kinds of situations.
Yeah, no, I would agree that that's hard, but I still would like some discussion of what would be considered significant and what would be considered insignificant, so that I feel more comfortable with this. And as I say, I don't expect them to answer it tonight, and I'm not. And you know, let me preface. I think overall this is a great bit of work. It's to the credit of the Plan Commission and the city staff that worked on it to this point. I think in general, I have no problem with this. There's just a couple of minor points here that I think could be cleaned up and make us even more confident in this, and that's what I'm after. And so I'm just a little uncomfortable leaving it at significant and not, you know, to me, significant, you know, from a statistical point of view has real meaning. And so when I see it used here, I'd like to understand more what staff means. And if they can just come back to me and show me how they would use it one way or the other, I'll be a lot happier and more comfortable with it. So that's where I'm going. And I think the rest of my questions are all very minor. I can toss them out here and get them through real quickly. On page 199, you use the word should with respect to the comprehensive plan, but then in section G2C further on, the language is much stronger. Okay.
Sorry, let's go back to that.
On page 199 of the proposed revisions, on the purpose statement, you say that in all plan unit developments, the final built form should be generally consistent with the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. But if you turn to G2C, which is on page 202, it says that the proposed development is consistent with the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the comprehensive plan. So I wonder if the word, instead of the form should be generally consistent, should be something like the final built form must be generally consistent with the goals and objectives, et cetera. So maybe just a word change there, just to make the two sections consistent with each other. F2C, we talk about all these, the elevations and so on, landscape plans and so on. Would it be too much to ask for a sort of a sketch of the whole thing so that it ties it all together?
Well, I think that in general, C is asking for a site plan.
Oh, okay.
Including all of this information.
Oh, okay. Okay. In terms of design criteria, who's providing the design review?
Well, it would. Staff would initially do it when we do our memo, but in the end, it would, when it comes to Plan Commission, City Council, you would determine if it meets the design criteria or not.
Okay, so it wouldn't go to like our design review board
No.
or anything like that?
And it's, like I said, it's consistency with the design features is part of the review criteria. So.
Okay. And then the last three things are real trivial, but maybe something can be put in. Lighting, I'd like to see language moving us towards, no upward light pollution, minimal light pollution effects. Signage where we discourage pylon signs in any way possible. Maybe they're very pylon signs only happen in a very special way. And then whatever we can do to encourage green building, energy efficiency, and so on. Whatever statements can be made in there. I know they're buried in the usages that you talk about here, but if we can mention them up front, I'd appreciate that too. That's the extent of my comments.
Okay, thank you. Robert Lewis, I believe you were next, is that correct?
I just had a comment in terms of the loosening up this whole process is very good, and I think the backup in the whole system is the zoning itself in terms of how things, the specificity of it is in the zoning. And I think by opening up the front end of it, I think you allow the latitude of the developers to come in and be progressive. But on the other hand, it's not the language is not an issue. It's a matter of, we have backup, and the backup would be the zoning.
Okay, thank you. Danielle?
I had a couple of clarifying questions, and then a comment. The first is, let's see, if it's the section about land use conflicts and what is excluded. I think it's section I1C12. That's I1C12. And I'm not sure exactly why landscaping service and lawn care is excluded, if that could be explained.
From a residential PUD?
It's, what was it, a residential PUD? I thought it was in business. Hold on a minute.
Sorry, let me, it's, that's, residential or mixed use PUD.
Oh, okay. Residential and mixed use.
I think the
The thought
general.
is that you would be stacking up supplies. Okay, that makes sense. I'm sorry, I just wasn't reading it for some reason. I thought that included commercial. I guess mixed use could include commercial, but it would usually be like neighborhood business style commercial. The second is something that we had talked about, and I'd like staff to, when it comes back to committee, change H5, which talks about the minor changes to the adopted development may be approved by the zoning administrator, provided that the changes do not. And if you look at number 4, it says, create problems regarding traffic circulation, public safety, emergency access, or public utilities. I'd like to change that just to clarify to say, create problems regarding vehicular, bike, or pedestrian circulation, so the traffic is not just car traffic. And my concern is just that if I don't want to put the zoning administrator in a position where developers are putting a lot of pressure on her or whoever it may be in the future to remove a section of sidewalk or do sidewalk on one side of a street in some section and not the other, or to take off a bike path. These are things that are expensive parts of development, but I don't think that those are, I want to clarify that that's not a minor change, and because it's not really clear in here, I want to make that clear. So let's, I'd like to see that in the next version that comes back to us. And then in terms of, I think that this ordinance overall is excellent, and it's a huge improvement on the PUD that we had in the past. I mean, it's just, it totally gets to what we're trying to accomplish, particularly with the design table. I basically think that this design table kind of embodies the fantasy of the council in terms of what design could be, and I think that some of these things we should consider making mandatory, such as the monumental signs, such as draining can't be the majority of open space, bike paths must be on arterials, etc. So this is kind of looking into the future. I'd like to look at some of the design standards which really should be mandatory, not just guidelines, but mandatory across the board with new developments.
Okay, thank you. Brandon?
Would you be willing to type that up and send it to council members and mayor?
Yeah, first I just wanted to ask, Matt, I don't know if maybe you mentioned this while I had stepped out of the room, but you distributed some additional recommended PUD changes that you wrote up to, mostly changes to the table, and I appreciate that a lot. I hope whenever we do take action or send this somewhere that we incorporate your latest version of work. Secondly, I just wanted to comment that I do agree with the concept Charlie raised, that somehow what's significant and what's insignificant needs to be handled or described. I feel like I share Charlie's concern that if we don't somehow say, then we don't have any guidelines to tell us whether, obviously, 1 square foot, we don't need to know about it, but a 20% change in something may really mean an impact to the neighbors. I had one other small comment about the uses. In the residential PUD, it looks like cemetery was one of the prohibited uses. And I just wanted to mention that in looking at that list again and sort of thinking like Danielle did, sometimes there are, mixed-use sort of neighborhoods or maybe traditional neighborhood design type neighborhoods where you have a small church and this church has a small cemetery, and I can see those sorts of small cemeteries that sometimes fitting in. That's another use that, as you think about it.
Okay, were you going to make a motion, Charlie?
I guess we need to move to send this to council, or to committee 2 weeks from now for discussion and clarification of the ordinance.
I would second that motion.
Any other discussion? Mr. Bowersox.
Yeah, one other thing before we're done with this, I'm glad we'll see it in 2 weeks. It is really big and a lot to digest, and so it'll be good to have some discussion of it more. The one issue we didn't talk about is the issue that came up in Plan Commission, the issue that one of the Plan Commissioners raised, that by taking out both levels of review, are we left with too little review? And I think it's a tough balance. I know, like the memo says, the point of PUDs is that they require higher levels of urban design and review, and at the same time, we don't want to make them too difficult so that no one uses them. I wonder if you had any discussions, Matt, at the Plan Commission or in thinking about this, of whether there is some middle ground. I know there's what's called a preliminary conference now that's a lot lighter on the paperwork. We don't require a stack of paperwork, but we do require a conference, which is one helpful way to talk through what we see the issues will be and let at least the Secretary of the Plan Commission know. Have you had any talk about what medium ground there so that the notice to us and everybody does happen and the review communications goes 2 ways through that process?
So, just let me clarify. So when you say that the review process goes both ways, are you talking from a staff developer perspective or more than that?
Actually, I think even to me, the issue is even a Plan Commission to developer and a council to developer, some level of review or at least of awareness of the project. Because to me, the one trap is that with only one time that there's review before the Plan Commission and review before this body, that someone works on a PUD and gets so far along and invests so much that then when it comes to the Plan Commission or to the council, we feel that the developers invested so much time and energy that we really don't want to step on their toes at that point by asking them to make changes, even if the Plan Commission or the council do have concerns. And that's the kind of thing we've all wanted to avoid. We've really wanted to be straight up with developers from the beginning and have good conversations where they know they're not going to get some change at the last minute from us in Urbana, that we're going to be straightforward and upfront. And I think having information to the Plan Commission and to the council that a PUD is happening, and some way for the Plan Commission or council to at least comment, maybe when the preliminary conference happens, and be aware, would help that process without requiring the huge stack of paperwork that makes it a burden.
Lynn Barnes?
I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I think it's incumbent upon our staff to keep both the Planning Commission and the council aware of anything that's kind of out of the current council's box, because you get to know us and you kind of get the flavor of the mood or however. And so I think that advance warning just to the council about projects, if you think something's kind of out there, is how that can happen. My second issue is I have a question. How does this new plan or process compare to what Champaign does?
All right, I'll answer Brandon's question first. I think my response at Plan Commission was, City Council has final approval process, so you guys do have that authority. Realistically speaking, in my experience, so whenever you've had a use or projects that's had to get special approvals, developers are smart people. They know it's coming. They're aware of the requirements. And obviously, I think the proposed ordinance goes a long way to kind of spelling out, and we have the RDF. So I think people or developers are aware of the requirements as these projects go forward through public approval. So I don't think that you're going to have a case where somebody's completely blindsided by a suggestion or a change or by the process itself. I mean, they're going to expect this. And even if there is the coordination during the plan formulation, I think there's always going to be changes even at the end. There's always going to be last minute changes. So, but I think the process that we have laid out really does allow for the commissions, both Plan Commission and City Council, to have their say in the process, allows the public, allows staff, because we raise a lot of these issues even at the staff level when we're going through development. So But I think there are good points, and obviously I don't have an answer tonight, but about, well, maybe we do, but but I think there are some good points about the kind of pre-notification, so.
Want to say something else?
Just to add to what Matt said, each agenda at Plan Commission has a space for study session, and that is a good time to introduce projects coming up, and it certainly can be used at any time by a developer to introduce a project, and, you know, with whatever materials are developed thus far to get some initial feedback and some awareness. We use study sessions for complex staff-initiated projects like PUD, a plan, things of that nature. Then it comes forward and they have that opportunity. So we can certainly encourage the use of a preliminary conference or a study session for complicated projects.
Dennis Roberts.
I'm sorry, could I answer Lynn's?
Oh.
And
Totally in fairness, yes.
yeah, I'm sorry, Lynn, could you just refresh my memory?
I just wanted to know how the process that's on the table for discussion
yes.
today, how does that compare to Champaign or other communities like us? But I think Champaign probably is my greatest interest.
Champaign requires preliminary and final. They have a preliminary conference with their planning director. We're actually a little bit more streamlined than Champaign is, and I really think we're a little bit more streamlined than most communities are.
You mean with this new process?
Yes.
Dennis Roberts.
Well, I guess there's two things that come to mind. I don't think it's useful to have the city council get in on preliminary planning personally. I mean, I think we're concerned about the planning, but we have in place both the zoning administrator and the community development department and the planners to handle it. These are professional people. They understand what the city council goals are. We have we have our comprehensive plan to refer to, and we have various zoning design features, and we'll be having more with this new ordinance development. So I think getting the city council in there, it's foot in the door too soon is not useful, and it sort of preempts the purpose of the Planning Commission, which I think are the professional people to do the initial review. Now, I think they should have a chance to make suggestions, and then the developer come back with his with the changes, encompassing them to them, perhaps. And I think the idea of having preliminary review and then final review, that as it passes through the Planning Commission, makes the most sense to me. I do, of course, the City Council is very interested in all the plans, and we sometimes see things that didn't get covered, or there might be loopholes. But I think it's more our purpose to kind of like see the end product and review that, rather than, and trust more, our staff and the Planning Commission to do the preliminary work. Go ahead.
Charlie Smythe.
Well, I'm all for something that's more streamlined than Champaign, so, but I would like to sort of comment along these lines. We're the elected officials that when big projects come along, people start talking to. They make the suggestions to us and so on. So we do need to be made aware of these things when they start up. Two recent examples come to mind of things that are, one that was well done because it's basically at completion. The other is just getting started. The Corridor 130 study had a number of presentations to the public, including elected officials, over the past year to collect comments and get some initial reactions to different ideas. A lot of participation there. And so I felt like they did a really good job of getting a lot of input from a lot of different places. So there's a one kind of a model of a conference type pre-planning study session approach. Another one that is more along the lines of a PUD is what's going on with Orchard Downs. We were all invited to essentially a study session, a presentation session, an ideas session by one of the proposed developers at Orchard Downs, where they said, here are some of our ideas. What are your reactions to these? What do you like? What do you don't like? And that's the kind of thing I think would be invaluable in the PUD process up front. And I don't know how you require it or whatever, but it is the kind of thing that I think would really help a developer nail something. You know, they'd know up front, you know, this is the direction they should be going, this has public support, this doesn't. And so that pre-plan commission presentation might be, or that initial plan commission presentation that includes a chance for public comment, includes the elected public officials, may be the kind of thing that you want to include in here. So with that, I'll shut up.
Lynn Barnes.
And again, I would say that being prescriptive in this document about the public process, I don't think is wise, because I think developers are smart. You know, Orchard Downs, you know, the university, they want to include us. They want the process to go smoothly. So they're thinking of ways to make sure that they incorporate the community to gain buy-in, which is very appropriate. Yet there are small things that would fall in the PUD that definitely you wouldn't want to do that. That wouldn't be as big a deal. You know, I just think, I think we need to stay away from prescriptiveness on that public process, because I think you got to be flexible in it.
Danielle Chenoweth.
I think we have excellent staff, and I also have never seen this council be a rubber stamp for what staff does. And almost every single time things come before us, we have ideas, despite the fact that it's usually very well cooked and well prepared. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And I do have, in reading through this, I had similar kinds of concerns. I almost kind of wanted to shut my eyes and leap off the precipice, but I thought, in some ways, what's going to happen if we move forward exactly with this is that someone's going to get burned in the 11th hour, and we don't want that to happen. So my proposal is, instead of the preliminary and final, I think that generally speaking, having that intensive review could become a barrier. Instead, when the first preliminary plans are submitted, I think that they should at least be sent to council so that we receive copies of them. And then if we have individual comments on them, we can send that in to staff. So basically, that does two things. One is we find out about it from our staff instead of press. We find out about it from staff instead of angry constituents who are upset with the movie theater going in next door as part of the PUD. And the second thing is that it allows the developers to hear from the folks who are going to make the final decision and the end of this result, to hear from them early on without necessarily going through a extremely cumbersome process of having to document and redocument or refine to get buy-in early on, and then total buy-in early on, and then total buy-in at the end. So I think that might be a happy compromise.
Dennis Roberts.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I like that recommendation. I mean, I'm always interested, you know, in early stages to see what's cooking on larger projects, and I guess it would be, you know, my thought that if plans are being submitted, say in the Planning Commission, they should be then CC'd to us as well, or like you're saying, let's get a copy of them early on, and then having individual comments and thoughts forwarded to appropriate individuals would allow us to have that kind of input.
Okay, we have a motion by Charlie Smythe, seconded by Dennis Roberts, to take this proposed revision to the January 22nd committee meeting, committee of the whole. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Finally, we have ordinance number 2007-01-010, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with AFSCME, Council 31, Local 1331, for the term beginning July 1st, 2006 through June 30th, 2010.
I move approval.
Okay, would you like to say anything about this major accomplishment, Mr. Bruce Weldon?
Yes, tonight the city bargaining team brings before you the tentative agreement between AFSCME and the city of Urbana The ASME local did vote earlier this evening to ratify the contract in an overwhelming margin. So you are the final authority on this contract. Just a couple of notes. This is a 4-year contract, 4-year term. The wages are 3, 3 1/4, 3 1/4, and 3 1/2 over the 4 years. This is retroactive to July 1, 2006. There are various language alterations within the document that we've previously discussed. I might point out that there is a significant sick leave incentive program outlined in number 4. The city will continue to pay the full 100% coverage of the employee's share of health insurance. There was a quid pro quo with regard to job bidding, a long-standing issue between the management and the union, and that resulted in some changes to the longevity schedule that we had discussed. And probationary period has been changed, as well as a few other operational items. I do respect and appreciate the hard work over the last 8 months of the ASME negotiating team, in particular Terry Brewer, Joe Knudsen, Brad Drew, Doug Buchanan, Doug Logue, and Rick Prince, as well as thanks to the city negotiating team, Mona Shannon, Assistant Chief Conley, Bill Gray, and Jim Kelly. Thank you, council members. It's been a long 7 or 8 months. Recommend approval.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we have a motion. Thank you very much for the great work that was done on this. I know it took a long time, but I think we have a good result. We have a motion by Lynn Barnes, seconded by Robert Lewis, to approve this agreement. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Barnes,
Yes.
Bowersox,
Yes.
Chenoweth,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Smythe.
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance is approved, and this meeting is adjourned.